This is why the galaxy leaves humanity alone. The warlord called us a clerical error. He thought our silence was a sign of weakness. He sent 100,000 soldiers to take our land, so we sent 100 wardens to take their pride. The high chamber predated fusion drives. That single fact governed the mood. Delegates crossed the threshold with a measured, instinctive slowness, their voices dropping an octave as they entered the obsidian bowl. The walls curved inward, etched with symbols no living species could still translate. It was a room designed to make empires feel like footnotes. The galactic president waited until the last gravity anchor locked. "Call the session," he said. The response wasn't a chime. It was a low, subharmonic pulse that vibrated through the floor and into the marrow of everyone present. It was the sound of a mountain breathing. "Hearing is open," the archivist announced. "Subject, border stability, the immune sectors." A Vethian delegate shifted, his neck frills tightening. "Again? We're debating a graveyard again?" The archivist's primary lens swiveled. Not a graveyard. A silence. From the Karan seating ring, a dry, rasping sound emerged, a laugh that sounded like grinding stones. The Karan admiral leaned forward, his scarred face caught in the light. "Let me guess," the admiral said. "Still quiet? Still nothing moving in the dark?" The archivist gestured. In the center of the chamber, the galaxy bloomed into a holographic map. Trade lanes glowed like gold lace. Borders flickered. It was a mess of activity, traffic, and noise. Except for the wound. A massive circular region in the core ward quadrant lay perfectly still. It was a pale, ghostly blue, devoid of beacons or signals. "Confirmed," the archivist said. "Human-designated territory remains undisturbed. No signals, no outward scans. 987 years of total radio silence." "A millennium of nothing," a delegate muttered. "Why do we even keep them on the map?" "Because," the president said, his voice cutting through the murmurs, "they earned the right to be forgotten." The Vethian delegate clicked his mandibles. "They don't patrol. They don't attend council. They don't even maintain a standing fleet. They've become a vacuum." "They aren't a vacuum," the admiral countered. "They're a closed door. There's a difference." The president nodded to the archivist. "The history file, for the younger systems." The star map vanished. The chamber plunged into darkness, replaced by raw sensor data from the Devourer War. It wasn't a movie. It was a massacre. Stars flickering out as hive fleets consumed them. High-tier dreadnoughts snapping like glass. The screams of a dozen dying civilizations layered into a single horrific white noise. A few delegates looked away. 112 years of slaughter, the archivist narrated. The coalition had failed. The math was simple. Extinction. Then the images shifted. Human ships appeared. They were blocky, ugly things, built of heavy plate and primitive kinetics. They looked like prehistoric clubs compared to the elegant weapons of the era. They were a Tier 3 species, the archivist said. Fragile, short-lived. But when the swarm hit the core, they didn't retreat. They dug in. A recording played. A human cruiser, burning from bow to stern, accelerating into the maw of a devourer hive ship. No last words. No heroic speech. Just a silent, violent detonation that took half a moon with it. "They didn't fight to win," the admiral said, his voice heavy. "They fought to make the enemy bleed. They burned their own worlds to deny the swarm food. They turned their entire civilization into a suicide vest." The display flickered to a single ancient document. One line was highlighted. "The human core shall be designated immune territory. Leave us alone." "That was the whole treaty?" a young delegate asked, incredulous. "No trade, no alliance. They just asked for isolation?" "It wasn't a request," the president said. "It was the price of our survival. We gave them their silence because we were afraid of what they would become if they stayed out here with us." The Vethian delegate shook his head. That was 1,000 years ago. They're a myth now, a ghost story. The Karth don't believe in ghost stories, the archivist noted. A red pulse appeared on the map. It was small, sharp, and deep inside the blue zone. A border probe? The president asked. An invasion fleet, the archivist corrected. The Karth have moved in 3 heavy carrier groups. They've begun planet-cracking operations in the fringe systems. The chamber went deathly still. Have the humans responded? The president asked. We sent the alert. And? They acknowledged receipt, the archivist said. That was 6 hours ago. The Karen admiral stood up, his metals clinking in the silence. He looked at the map, then at the exits. What are you doing, Admiral? The president asked. Ordering my fleet to the far side of the galaxy, the admiral said. I've seen what happens when you wake the humans. I don't want to be downwind when they start swinging. The president looked at the red pulse on the map, the Karth fleet, arrogant and loud, moving deeper into the quiet. The hearing is adjourned, the president said softly. Pray for the Karth. They're about to find out why the rest of us stayed away. Inside the War Council of the Karth Dominion, the air was thick with the scent of ozone and ambition. Supreme Warlord Karth stood before a tactical projection that bathed his jagged features in a ghostly blue. They left it empty. The words didn't carry the weight of a warning. They carried the light, sharp thrill of a predator finding an unlocked door. Warlord Karth gestured at the map. A massive, silent territory that sat like a stone in the middle of a rushing stream. Say it again, Karth commanded. The human immune sector, the strategist repeated, his voice tight with excitement. Minimal patrols, no orbital fortresses. Scans show civilian heavy colonies with 0 visible military infrastructure. It's a vacuum, my warlord. Kareth's mandibles clicked, a sound of dry amusement. So this is the species the council whispers about? This is the ghost that keeps the Karen admiral awake at night? A ripple of predatory laughter moved through the council. They don't contest the border probes, a fleet captain added, leaning over the console. We've nudged their sensors 3 times. No scrambles, no threats. Their response time isn't just slow, it's non-existent. Perhaps they've forgotten how to fight, someone offered. Karth rose from his command throne, his armor hissing as the joints pressurized. Not forgotten. Afraid. A species that survived a war by sacrificing so much of itself that nothing remained worth defending. They didn't win their independence. They bought a stay of execution with their own blood. Now, the account is empty. A junior analyst at the back of the room cleared his throat nervously. My warlord. The archives. The Devourer records specifically state. The records, Karth snapped, turning a cold gaze on the subordinate, were written by survivors who needed to justify their own cowardice. Every old power tells the same lie. We bled so you could live. It's a fairy tale used to demand obedience from younger, stronger blood. He turned back to the projection, his eyes narrowing. Look at them. No standing fleets, no expansion, no ambition. They are a stagnant pond. They demilitarized by treaty, the strategist noted. They demilitarized because they were broken, Karth countered. Weak species always romanticize their losses. They call it peace, because defeat tastes too bitter. We aren't invading an empire. We are reclaiming space from a ghost. The first expansion order was signed before the cycle ended. The human response arrived 12 standard hours after the first Karth scout ships crossed the line. It wasn't a fleet. It wasn't a warning shot. It was a comms request. Karth accepted the transmission in his private office. On the main screen, a human appeared. He wasn't a soldier. He wore a plain charcoal-colored suit with no medals, no insignia, and no visible weapons. He looked tired. You have crossed a recognized boundary, the human said. His voice was calm, devoid of the theatrical bravado the Karth expected from an adversary. We request clarification of your intent. Karth tilted his head, his secondary eyes blinking in mock surprise. That's the opening move? A request for clarification? The human waited, his expression as unreadable as a slab of granite. Here's my clarification. We are expanding, Karth said, his voice booming. The Karth Dominion is a living organism, and a living thing must feed. Your sector holds vast deposits of phase lattice chromium, the marrow our next generation of fold drives requires. To leave such power unrefined is a crime against the natural order of growth. We find your immune status to be nothing more than an outdated clerical error. A long pause followed. The human didn't flinch. This region is protected under the ratification of silence, the human said. The treaty was signed by every major power in the disk. We advise reconsideration of your flight paths. Advise? Karth laughed, the sound echoing off the bridge's metal bulkheads. You advise Warlord Karth. We never signed such treaty. The accord exists to preserve the peace, the human said softly. We prefer it remain intact. Then enforce it, Karth spat. Or step aside and let a relevant species take what you're too weak to hold. The channel went black. Karth waited for the retaliatory strike. He waited for the sensor pings of an incoming fleet. Nothing happened. The second move was an act of deliberate desecration. Karth heavy lifters moved into the system, dismantling human automated mining rigs and replacing them with Karth banners. They began strip mining an asteroid belt within sight of a human colony world. Havenfall. Again the comms chimed. This time the face on the screen was older. A woman with gray hair and eyes that looked like they had seen the end of the world and found it boring. She sat in a room that looked like a library. Real paper, real wood. A small identifier glowed at the edge of the projection. Elizabeth Morrow, Director, Human Interstellar Accord Authority. We allowed the first violation, she said. Her voice was thin but steady. We will allow the second. Emerging species have not yet learned that peace is usually purchased by those who paid the highest price for war. Murmurs of indignation rippled through the Karth command deck. But do not misunderstand this restraint, she continued. Karth stepped toward the screen, his shadow looming over her projected image. You taught the galaxy to mistake exhaustion for enlightenment, he said. They see sacrifice and call it nobility. We see a species that spent everything it had and now survives on reputation alone. The woman exhaled slowly. Her eyes flicked, just for a millisecond, to something off camera. A readout, perhaps, or a clock. We are requesting that you do not proceed further, she said. The stability you currently enjoy was not achieved by accident. The boundaries you are testing were written in blood, not ink. You mistake Galaxy's pity for respect, Karth said. Go back to your books, old woman. The stars belong to those who take them. The woman's expression didn't shift into anger. It shifted into something far worse. Mourning. Please, step carefully, Warlord, she replied. For your own sake. Do not cross a line you are not prepared to find the end of. The screen cut to static. The silence on the bridge lasted longer than usual. A fleet captain shifted his weight, his scales rasping against his flight suit. My warlord, they did not threaten us. They didn't even mention their military. Because they don't have one, Karth said, though a small seed of irritation was beginning to itch in the back of his mind. They're begging. It's pathetic. As the Karth fleet moved deeper into the blue zone, the reports became strange. Long-range unmanned probes began to vanish. No debris, no distress signals, just a sudden cessation of data. Seismic sensors on the captured mining platforms began picking up deep structure activity from the nearby human colony of Havenfall. Energy spikes? Karth demanded during a tactical briefing. None, my warlord, the analyst reported. Minimal orbital defenses, no weapon signatures, no shield harmonics, just vibrations. Rhythmic, like heavy machinery operating miles below the crust. Mining, Karth dismissed. A dying species scraping the marrow from the bones of their past. Let them dig their own graves. A scout commander stepped forward, his head bowed. There are no surface fortifications on the target world, sir. No orbital guns. But the planetary scans, they feel wrong. Explain, Karth growled. It's too quiet, the commander said. A world with 10 million inhabitants should produce a certain amount of electronic noise. This planet is clean, like it's holding its breath. Karth waved him off with a snarl. Fear makes ghosts where there are only shadows. 1,000 years of protection breeds complacency. They never expected anyone to come for them. Prepare the ground assault. This ends today, Karth declared. He studied the floor-to-ceiling tactical hololith, watching gold icons converge on Havenfall. A soft, productive world filled with farmers, researchers, and laborers who mistook distance for safety. A mining hub heavy with phase lattice chromium, its vaults swollen with the harvest of nearby asteroid belts. To Karth, it was not a planet. It was a solution waiting to be applied, clean, mathematical, and inevitable. The strategist's voice filtered through the comms, digitized and deferential. The colony has no orbital defense, sir, but ground scans show a massive subterranean network. If they've bunkered down, then we collapse the bunkers, Karth interrupted. They are civilians, farmers and miners. They will break at the first sight of a drop pod. This isn't a war, strategist. It's an acquisition. The office doors hissed open. His primary assistant rushed in, her crest scales pale with distress as she held out a high-priority comms slate. My warlord, an emergency signal from the galactic president, she stammered. He is demanding an immediate audience. Karth didn't look away from the map. Put him through. It was expected. The projection of the galactic president flared into the center of the room. His internal light was a frantic, jagged strobe of anxiety. Karth, abort your burn immediately, the president commanded. You are drunk on your own momentum. You are blinded by the ease of your progress. Cease all hostilities and withdraw to the neutral zone now. This will not end well for you. Karth smiled, his voice dripping with condescension. You and your colleagues have spent too long staring at dusty archives, President. You've coddled these humans out of a superstitious terror for a species that no longer exists. This tough guy act of theirs is a facade, a hollow shell meant to scare children and old men. They are pathetic creatures hiding in a hole, and I am about to fill it in. They are not hiding, the president whispered, his image flickering as Karth reached for the disconnect. They are waiting. I am not trying to save them from you, warlord. I am trying to save you from them. Karth waved a dismissive claw. Go back to preserving museums and apologies. This era belongs to those willing to take it. The projection vanished. Karth turned back to the planet, satisfaction settling into his chest. Far below, in the silent streets of the Havenfall, automated sensors logged the arrival of the Karth fleet. They didn't transmit a plea for mercy. They didn't call the galactic president. They transmitted a series of 128-bit authorization keys. Deep beneath the planet's crust, in vaults that had been sealed since the last devourer was hunted down, lights began to flicker on. Not the soft, warm light of a home, but the harsh, red strobe of a combat-ready facility. Dust fell from the ceiling of ancient halls as massive gears, lubricated by 1,000 years of stillness, began to turn. Armor racks hissed open. Weapon cores powered by the dying heat of the planet's own heart spun to life with a predatory hum. In the darkness of a command center that hadn't seen a human face in 10 centuries, a single console glowed green. A voice, synthetic, cold, and utterly detached, echoed through the steel corridors. Dormancy cycle terminated. Protocol. Resumption. And then, a second voice. Human. Rough from disuse. Status check. The reply was the sound of 1,000,000 safety catches being released at once. A sound of something very large, very patient, and very hungry, finally beginning to breathe. Above, in the sky, the first Karth drop pods began to fall like burning rain. They expected to find a graveyard. They were about to find out that in the immune sector, the dead don't stay buried. "This is Warlord Karth," the command frequency crackled, cutting through the static of atmospheric entry. "Report status." "Orbital defenses neutralized," a fleet officer replied, his voice brimming with unearned confidence. "Automated satellites were ancient, scarcely powered. Surface resistance is minimal. Scans show no active military signatures." "Good," Karth said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "The myth dies today. Begin planetary seizure." Transports screamed through the thin atmosphere of Havenfall, their hulls glowing cherry red. 100,000 Karth shock troops, the pride of the Dominion, deployed across the vast mining plains. They hit the ground in perfect formation, heavy armor churning the gray dust, artillery pieces locking onto the horizon. The planet did not resist. That, more than the silence, unsettled the veteran commanders. There were no anti-air batteries, no insurgent fire, no panicked broadcasts. "Why aren't they fighting back?" the battalion commander murmured. "This doesn't fit the history. It's too clean." "The humans are evacuating," another replied, pointing to the long-range thermal feeds. "Civilians only. They're cramming into old transport hulls and burning for deep space. They've abandoned the world." Karth watched the feeds of the fleeing ships from his bridge. "Run," he whispered. "That is what broken species do when the real world finally comes for them." A lieutenant at the sensor suite hesitated, his hand hovering over a spiking readout. "My warlord. Ground scans show anomalous structures shifting beneath Sector 9. Deep crust movement." "Mining shafts," Karth snapped. "They're likely triggering scuttling charges to bury their tech. Ignore them. Focus on the primary starport." Then the ground shook. It wasn't the sharp, jagged jolt of an explosion. It was a rhythmic, tectonic groan. "Seismic spike," the sensor officer shouted. "Depth, 2 kilometers and rising. It's moving against the continental shelf." "Volcanic activity?" a captain guessed, gripping his console. "No heat signature," the officer replied, his voice rising in pitch. "It's cold. It's mechanical." A kilometer ahead of the Karth vanguard, the plains of Havenfall literally folded. A bunker door, wide enough to swallow a dreadnought, breached the surface like a jagged wound. Stone and soil cascaded into the depths as a massive platform rose from the dark. "What in the—" The locking mechanisms disengaged with a sound like a thunderclap, and something walked out. "Visual contact!" a forward scout yelled. His helmet feed bypassed the filters, projecting a shaky, pixelated image onto Karth's main screen. Unknown armored units emerging from the breach. "How many?" Karth demanded, his mandibles tightening. A pause. A long, confused silence. 100. Laughter erupted across the Karth command channel. 100? A captain scoffed. "We have an entire corps on the ground. They sent a single company to stop 100,000? Another officer, younger, voice edged with uneasy bravado. "They think we're scared of ghosts? Crush them. Forward squads, flank and—" But before he could finish, the laughter died the moment the first shot was fired. There was no visible beam, no plasma arc, just a distortion in the air, a ripple of kinetic force so violent it shattered the sound barrier. 3 Karth heavy tanks took the impact. They didn't explode. Something punched through them end to end, shredding everything in its path, leaving nothing but torn armor and screaming alarms. What just happened? I don't see a projectile. No thermal bloom. Armor breach across multiple vehicles, same trajectory. It's punched through our shielding like it isn't there." The armored figures advanced. They were towering, black and iron gray, layered in plating thick enough to reinforce a starship's prow. Glowing blue markings were etched deep into the metal, pulsing with a slow, predatory rhythm. Their armor wasn't just armor. It was alive, humming with suppressed energy, vents exhaling vapor that shimmered like heat haze over molten steel. Each step cracked the permacrete beneath them, not from weight alone, but from the sheer density of the gravitic systems built into their frames. They didn't take cover. They didn't crouch. They just walked. A voice, cold and broadcast on every frequency, Karth and human alike, cut through the chaos. Bastion Wardens deployed. Graveward systems active. Rules of engagement. Deterrence. Target them, a Karth commander screamed. All units, concentrate fire. Kill them now. They're just 100, a commander bellowed over the comms, his voice cracking with forced confidence. Overwhelm them. Swarm tactics. Crush them under numbers. Thousands of soldiers turned as one, weapons blazing. The horizon ignited. Tank cannons roared in unison, and a barrage of missiles streaked toward the lead armored figure. The impact was a wall of fire that obscured the entire sector. The smoke cleared. The figure was still walking. Its helm, a featureless slab of dark alloy, turned toward the Karth line. Direct hit didn't stop it. Armor integrity unchanged. Sensors say the plating is absorbing the kinetic energy? That's impossible. And then, the carnage began. The Wardens moved like thunder, their massive frames blurring into streaks of black lightning that cut through the Karth vanguard like heated blades through butter. They didn't just fire. Their weapons poured pure chaos into the ranks, but never wastefully. Every shot was deliberate. Every trigger pull found a target, and usually several. Each kinetic round was a hyper-accelerated nightmare, tearing through a Karth soldier, then punching onward through more bodies, armored transports, and the reinforced concrete walls behind them. Wherever the Wardens struck, terror followed in a wake of shredded alloy and red mist. Formations collapsed in seconds. The Karth unleashed everything they had: plasma batteries, missile salvos, even their pride, the Ginthar Devastator, a relic-class siege cannon capable of cracking fortress walls, fired point-blank into the advancing figures. The Wardens shrugged off the searing white-hot blasts as if they were a minor annoyance. The Wardens didn't slow. Explosions rolled over them, fire washing across their armor in waves. When the smoke cleared, they were still there, walking, unmarked, unimpressed. Shots struck their plating and dispersed like rain on stone. That was when discipline finally broke and came the panic. I can't hurt it. My autocannon's tearing through Durasteel, but it's ignoring me. They're not even aiming. They're just walking through us. Corporal Myrell's squad. They're just gone. No bodies. No debris. Like they evaporated. A Karth commander watched a warden move across the battlefield, not like a soldier, but like a predator loose in a killing ground. It covered 50 meters in a heartbeat, a blur of motion that defied its massive bulk. It slammed into a 30-ton Karth tank. The tank didn't just stop, it flipped, tumbling through the air like a toy. The warden planted one armored foot on the exposed hull and fired its wrist-mounted cannon. The round punched through the tank, exited the bottom, tore through the vehicle behind it, and detonated inside a reinforced command bunker 300 meters away. Screams flooded the channel. They're too fast. They're inside our formations. Fall back. Secondary line, fall back. They're not human. They can't be. Another warden raised a long-barreled rifle. The ferro-concrete wall behind a Karth fire team disintegrated into dust. The rounds didn't stop at the cover. They passed through the wall, through the soldiers, and through the APC parked behind them. They're shooting through the terrain. We're not safe, even in the bunkers. Their rounds are tearing straight through them. A thermal-tipped missile screamed toward one of the figures. A Karth soldier cheered as he saw the lock-on light turn green. The warden didn't dodge. It reached out and caught the missile mid-air. For half a second, the battlefield went silent. Then the warden turned and threw the projectile back. The missile hit the launch platform with the force of an orbital strike. The entire ridge ceased to exist. Silence. Then the sound of thousands soldiers realizing they were being hunted. This is impossible. They aren't soldiers. They're monsters. I saw one rip a plasma turret out of its mount and beat a mech to death with it. Retreat. Full retreat to the landing craft. The channel dissolved into a cacophony of terror and static. Where are our reserves? Karth roared, slamming his fist onto the tactical map. They're gone, my warlord, an officer shrieked. Command Node Alpha was destroyed in the first 10 minutes. Whole battalions are being wiped out in seconds. Karth stared at the display. 100 blue icons were systematically erasing thousands of red ones. How long since ground contact? He whispered. 3 hours, a trembling officer replied. Losses? Too many. We've lost contact with the entire 1st and 2nd divisions. A new feed burst onto the display. A Karth heavy assault line was being liquidated as a single warden walked straight through sustained heavy machine gun fire. A voice echoed from its external speakers, calm, almost bored. You were warned. Another feed showed a warden standing atop a hill of burning wreckage, its weapon cooling in the wind. Who are they? Karth whispered to the empty air of his command room. The final transmission from the surface came from a fleeing officer, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he reached his transport. They're not chasing us, he panted, looking back at the carnage. They're letting us run. They want us to tell the others. The signal cut. 4 hours after the first boot touched the soil of Havenfall, the invasion force broke. Ships fled orbit in total disarray, colliding with one another in their desperation to jump to warp. Karth watched the planet recede on the screen. It looked peaceful again. Blue, quiet, untouched, as if the last 4 hours had been a fever dream. Then a text-only message appeared on his personal console. No threats, no demands for reparations. Only 6 words in the ancient script of the Corps. This was your final warning. Karth's mandibles trembled. A cold, sinking weight twisted deep in his abdomen, a primal fear he had not felt since his first blooding. His legs shook, and he locked them in place out of sheer will, terrified that someone might see him falter. For the first time in his reign, he understood why the galactic president spoke in whispers, why the Karen admiral had turned his fleet away without argument or pride. This was not diplomacy born of weakness. It was survival learned the hard way. Karth stared at the peaceful blue world getting smaller and felt the full, crushing scope of his mistake. He had not challenged a rival power or tested a border. He had reached blindly into something ancient, controlled, and restrained by choice, and he had done so without ever glimpsing its true depth. The realization settled like a death sentence. His actions would not end with a failed campaign. They would echo forward, into reprisals, into judgments, into consequences that would find his people long after his own bones had turned to dust. It wasn't that the humans had lost their will to fight. It was that they had grown so good at it, so catastrophically precise that they had locked themselves away, so the rest of the galaxy might be allowed to exist at all. The royal hall of the Karth Dominion was a monument to noise, to the clashing of blades, the roaring of victories, and the thrum of a world in constant motion. Now, it was a tomb. The air was thick with the sharp, bitter pheromones of fear. No one spoke. The banners of previous conquests hung motionless from the vaulted ceiling, their embroidered histories suddenly feeling fragile, like parchment dipped in water. Warlord Karth stood at the center of the mosaic floor. He did not sit on his throne. He didn't think his legs would support the climb. "Play it again," he said. His voice was a dry rasp. The holographic recording resumed. 100 black iron figures advancing through a storm of fire. Karth tanks, the pinnacle of Dominion engineering, collapsing like discarded toys. Bunkers pierced as if the reinforced concrete were nothing more than morning fog. And the missile, the warden catching it with a casual, terrifying grace, returning it, and erasing a battalion from existence. The Karth Council watched in paralyzed silence. When the recording flickered out, a counselor finally whispered the only 2 words that mattered. 100. Karth closed his eyes. The image of the wardens burned into his retinas. 100, he repeated. A war minister, his chest heavy with metals that now felt like lead weights, found his voice. My king, why didn't they stop us sooner? The moment we crossed their border, The moment we violated the treaty, they had those wardens. Why didn't they show them then? The chamber fell quiet. Karth's claws tightened against the arm of his throne. The question gnawed at him because he had already begun to understand the answer. They let us come, he said slowly. They watched us assemble fleets, watched us commit to the invasion, watched us step onto their soil. A counselor swallowed. To make certain we couldn't mistake the lesson. To make certain, another whispered, that the message would be burned into our memory and carried home by survivors. Karth exhaled, the sound hollow. They didn't threaten us with force when we first tested their border because a threat can be ignored. A warning can be rationalized. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of rulers who had never known true helplessness. Until now. They didn't need to, Karth replied. They weren't fighting a war. They were conducting a demonstration. A counselor finally gave voice to the fear hanging over the chamber. My king, if that was only a demonstration, what comes next? What do we do now? Suddenly, the palace foundations groaned. Orbital alarms, the deep rhythmic sirens of the Dominion's planetary shield, screamed in a frantic dissonant chorus. Multiple mass translations, a sentinel cried from the sensor pit. Directly above the capital, human signatures. Karth's heart lurched. A cold, hollow panic flooded his chest, raw and familiar. It was the same feeling he'd had as a child, standing frozen in the doorway after a catastrophic mistake, knowing his father had already turned toward him. Not anger yet. Worse. Certainty. The tactical projection bloomed into life. They didn't arrive as a spear tip or a tactical formation. They arrived as a wall. Ships of ancient, brutal design emerged from the void. Blocky, scarred, stripped of elegance. No sweeping hulls, no ornamental spines. They looked less like warships and more like tools. Hammers waiting for something to break. And beneath the shadow of the dreadnoughts, dropships. Hundreds of them. A counselor found his voice, thin and unsteady. How many ships? The sentinel swallowed hard. 120 capital vessels. A pause. Each ship, the sentinel continued, barely above a whisper, is registering 10 warden signatures. The chamber went silent. Karth didn't need to do the math. His legs nearly gave out, the palace floor suddenly feeling far too fragile. 100 wardens had destroyed 100,000 soldiers. What he had invited now was not retaliation. It was extinction. The hall erupted into a cacophony of panic. 1,200 of those things? We can't fight 1,000. Our city defenses won't last 10 minutes. Karth raised a clawed hand, his voice a whip crack. Stand down. All units, power down weapons. There will be no resistance. The throne guards hesitated, their hands tightening on their pikes. Obey, Karth hissed, or die pointlessly for a pride we no longer possess. The sky above the Karth capital went dark, not from clouds, but from the belly plates of 100 human dropships. They didn't scatter. They didn't seize the orbital shipyards. They simply hung there, 1,000-ton guillotine suspended over the heart of the Dominion. Only one craft descended. A single lead dropship touched down in the royal courtyard. The roar of its engine shattered every window in the palace, a deafening proclamation of arrival. The reinforced doors of the royal hall didn't explode. They simply melted. A precise, silent application of thermal energy turned the 10-ton gates into glowing slag that hissed against the floor. Then they stepped through. Up close, they were worse than the footage. Each warden stood nearly 4 meters tall, slabs of blackened armor layered so thick they looked carved rather than forged. Their helms were faceless masks of dark alloy, broken only by twin ocular slits burning a steady, predatory red. Every step they took sent a faint tremor through the palace foundations, miniature seismic warnings that rattled chandeliers and silenced breath. Royal guards froze where they stood. Counselors stiffened, claws locked, mandibles half open. No one reached for a weapon. No one remembered how. They moved with terrifying restraint. No haste, no hesitation. Just inevitability. 10 statues of iron and judgment, spreading just enough to frame the entrance. Between these 10 giants stepped a small, solitary figure. She wore a plain, dark suit and held a small, leather-bound book in her hand. She looked exactly as she had on the screen, tired, ancient, and profoundly disappointed. Elizabeth Morrow, Director, Human Interstellar Accord Authority. Karth stared at her, his mind screaming. This was the old woman he had mocked. This was the pathetic creature he had told to go back to her books. She stood in the center of the hall, a tiny spark of humanity flanked by 10 gods of metal whose red eyes never left the council. The silence was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. Director Morrow looked around the room, her gaze finally resting on Karth. She didn't look angry. She looked like a gardener surveying a ruinous infestation. She slowly opened her book, her voice soft but carrying to every corner of the hall. "I believe," she said quietly, "we were discussing the terms of the clerical error." Karth looked up at the red glow of the wardens, then at the shadow of the fleet visible through the high windows, and finally at the woman. In that moment, the arrogance that had fueled his empire evaporated, replaced by a cold mathematical certainty. He realized he wasn't just losing a war. He was looking at the physical manifestation of an apocalypse. There were no tactics left, no hidden reserves. Every second he remained standing was a second closer to his planet's extinction. He realized that the only way to save his people from the correction was to destroy his own pride. This was the only move he had left. He fell to his knees, his forehead pressing against the cold, vibrating stone. "Mercy," he croaked. "We surrender. We were ignorant. We did not know the depth of the silence." Director Morrow regarded the warlord with a look of profound, weary calm. "We know," she said. Somehow that was worse. "You thought we were weak," the human continued, her voice carrying to every corner of the silent hall. "You saw our scars and thought they were vulnerabilities. You thought our losses meant fragility." Karth kept his face to the floor. "We were wrong." "Yes," she agreed. "You were." A counselor, bolder or more desperate than the rest, dared to speak. Will you destroy us now, to ensure the silence remains?" Director Morrow shook her head. "No." A flicker of hope moved through the room, but it was quickly extinguished. "We are not here for vengeance," the human said. "Vengeance is an emotional response. We are here for correction." She made a small, efficient gesture. The 10 wardens shifted in unison. Not a threat, but a statement of finality. "You will withdraw from all human-designated space," the ambassador stated. "You will return every system, every station, and every resource taken during your expansion." "Yes!" Karth gasped. "Immediately. It is already being done. And," Elizabeth Morrow continued, "that will not be enough." The hall went deathly still. "For 100 standard cycles," the human said, "the Karth Dominion will serve as the primary guardian of the human border." Confusion rippled through the council. "You will station your fleets where ours are absent," the ambassador explained. "You will maintain the perimeter. You will answer to human coordinators. If a threat emerges, you will be the first to meet it." A counselor whispered, "You would make us your guardians?" "Students," the director corrected. "You will teach your young the true history of the Devourer War. You will show them the archives of our sacrifice. You will show them what it cost to buy the peace you tried to break." The human looked down at Karth. "You wanted to test the sleeping giant. Now, you will spend the next century ensuring no one else is foolish enough to do it again." Karth bowed lower than protocol even allowed. "We accept. We serve." The director inclined her head once. "Good." As she turned to leave, Karth, stripped of pride, reduced to something small, gave in to the question that had been clawing at him since Havenfall. He asked it the way a chastened student speaks to a teacher, voice low, careful. What are these wardens? He asked. What kind of weapon are they? The director stopped. For a moment the chamber thought she might ignore him. Then she spoke. They are what desperation creates, she said evenly. They were born from our most basic instinct, the refusal to go extinct. She turned just enough for him to see her face. They were forged during the Devourer Wars, when the existence of every known species was on the line, when survival demanded more than courage, more than fleets, more than numbers. Her voice hardened. The ones inside that armor are not human. At least, not anymore. Not in the way you understand it. They gave that up to wear it. The armor isn't equipment. It's a second skin. Kareth's throat tightened. What you saw at Havenfall, she continued, was restraint. A fraction. A demonstration scaled so your world would still exist afterward. She met his eyes fully now. At full power, wardens do not conquer. They erase. When they are unleashed without limits, they leave only glass and molten metal behind them. A pause. No enemy that has ever faced them at full capacity survived long enough to tell the story. Silence crushed the chamber. Karth lowered his head, understanding settling like a sentence carved in stone. What they had faced was not humanity's wrath. It had been mercy. The humans departed as silently as they had arrived. The fleet vanished from the sensors within the hour. The palace remained standing, though it felt haunted by the weight of what had occupied it. Karth rose slowly, looking at his council. His reign was over. His service had begun. We will obey, he said. Outside, the galaxy watched the news of the Karth's correction, not in fear, but in a new profound understanding. Human space remained quiet, unpatrolled, unthreatened. It was still a blue void on the map, a place where no signals were sent and no trade was conducted. But now, everyone knew. The giant wasn't asleep. It was simply choosing not to move. And in a galaxy defined by the noise of war, that choice was the most terrifying power of all.